Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney welcomed a US Court of International Trade ruling that blocked most of President Donald Trump's tariffs on Thursday, many of which applied to imports from Canada.
Mr. Speaker, the government welcomes yesterday's decision by the US Court of International Trade, which is consistent with Canada's long-standing position that the US IEEPA tariffs were unlawful as well as unjustified.
On the other side of the Pacific, China urged the United States to end its, quote, erroneous practice of imposing unilateral tariffs.
中方一贯主张，贸易战没有赢家，保护主义没有出路。美方推出单边关税措施以来，不仅没有解决美自身任何问题，反而严重破坏国际经贸秩序，严重干扰企业生产经营和民众生活消费，损人不利。
The White House has expressed confidence it can overcome the Federal Trade Court ruling blocking Trump's sweeping tariffs. Since the beginning of his second term as president, the US economy has seen its first drop in over 3 years. It shrank at a 0.2% annual pace from January through March this year.
At least 2 people died and others were injured after hundreds of Palestinians desperate for food pushed and shoved to get into a United Nations warehouse. Aid seekers were seen carrying large bags of flour out of the building. Due to severe shortages of food and aid into Gaza, a single bag weighing around 25 kilos currently sells for almost €450. Palestinians in Gaza have been under a tight Israeli blockade, including an 11-week total block on critical supplies, which has pushed the Strip to the brink of famine. The World Food Programme has consistently warned for the deteriorating conditions on the ground and have called for an urgent aid scale-up. It comes just a day after a crowd of hungry Palestinians overran a new US-backed aid distribution hub, and IDF troops fired warning shots in an effort to restore calm, killing several and injuring dozens. The Israeli military denied having aimed directly at the crowd. The hub had been opened by the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an organization that has been highly criticized by the UN, who refuse to work with the scheme as they say it violates humanitarian principles.
Russian overnight drones on Ukraine have killed 3 people and injured 27 across 9 regions, including Sumy, Kharkiv and Donetsk. Local law enforcement reported more than 2,000 strikes along the front line and in residential neighborhoods, causing damage to buildings and homes.
Смотришь, как всегда, раз-два и все. 3. А он как начал, один за одним, и до 13-го раза. И 13-й летел, и где-то не взорвался, упал просто и все.
Ukrainian air defences claim to have intercepted 56 of the drones, 10 with firepower and 46 using radar or electronic warfare. An explosion was also reported in Russia's Stavropol, which the region's governor says killed the city's deputy mayor, Zor Gertsiev. The latest strikes follow a 3-day wave of aerial attacks by Moscow, during which Russian forces launched more than 600 drones and dozens of missiles across Ukraine.
Chega, the Farright party led by André Ventura, has become the second largest political force in Portugal. They place behind the centre-right coalition Democratic Alliance and head of the Socialist Party. The election results broke with the country's political status quo, as centre-right and centre-left parties have typically alternated between government and opposition. Prime Minister Luis Montenegro's centre-right Democratic Alliance secured 91 seats of the National Assembly's 230 seats, making it the largest bloc in parliament. Montenegro, who has ruled out working with Chega, said he would form a new minority government instead. Chega's rise coincides with far-right gains across Europe, with parties including Alternative for Germany, known as AfD, now in the political mainstream.
As the second round of the Polish presidential election nears, disinformation increasingly spreads. Targeting both candidates, Rafał Trzaskowski and Karol Nawrocki, so-called FIMI tools are commonly used. Foreign information manipulation and interference is then taken over by domestic entities.
Te narracje, które obserwujemy, są bardzo szerokie. One dotyczą m.in. wojny w Ukrainie, Ukraińców samych w sobie, uchodźców i uchodźczyń, kwestii związanych z Unią Europejską, ale też i takiej narracji o pokoju. To jest taka podstawowa narracja promowana przez Federację Rosyjską i nie tylko, bo też i Białoruś, które zakładają, że to one są, że tylko Rosja w jakimś sensie jest gwarantem pokoju i że Rosja dąży do pokoju.
Most fake news circulates on social media. These platforms remain leaky and enable the lightning-fast spread of false information. Experts point to two main operations: overload, bombarding users with an avalanche of information, and doppelganger, impersonating well-known media.
Czyli na przykład ostatnio pojawił się taki news o tym, że głosowanie pocztowe będzie skażone bronią biologiczną. Więc musimy spodziewać się tego typu ataków wręcz, prawda? Kiedy sobie scrollujemy, przeglądamy wiadomości, no to łatwo jest nie zauważyć, tak, że to logo Euronews czy jakiegokolwiek innego medium jest tylko dodane, tak, a materiał pochodzi z jakiegoś absolutnie przypadkowego konta, który chce wpłynąć na nas i na przykład zdemotywować, doprowadzić do tego, że nie będziemy głosować.
A study conducted at the American University in Bulgaria indicates that the Balkan countries and those of the former Soviet Union are most vulnerable to disinformation. Escalation of activities occurs before important events, such as elections.
Civil society groups in Kosovo on Tuesday protested against the country's elected assembly's impasse with a symbolic demonstration in front of the parliament building in Pristina. The demonstration took place shortly before the 22nd attempt to convene a parliamentary session of the 9th Legislative Assembly failed. After the parliamentary elections of February, Kosovo still does not have a constituted elected assembly, raising questions of legality over the current government.
Kemi dorëzuar 17 kallëzime penale kundër kryeministrit, ish kryeministrit, në fakt, zotit Albin Kurti dhe ish ministrave të kabinetit të tij, duke përfshirë këtu edhe një ish zëvendësministre, të gjithë këta të zgjedhur deputet dhe të certifikuar sipas rezultatit zgjedhor nga Komisioni Qendror Zgjedhor me datën 27 mars. Ne konsiderojmë dhe besojmë që nga data 27 mars
Although Prime Minister Albin Kurti and members of his cabinet resigned from the executive positions ahead of the swearing-in of MPs, opponents argued that according to the law, members of his government cannot function on a technical mandate.
Kosova ka qeverinë në detyrë, unë jam kryeministër në detyrë, ajo që mungon Kosovës është kuvendi I ri Republikës.
Normalna situacija bi bila da oni uopšte nisu položili zakletvu za poslanike, nego da su nastavili da izvršavaju svoje dužnosti u izvršnoj vlasti, a da kasnije, zavisno od toga da li će da formiraju vlast ili ne, promene mesta u parlamentu.
Albin Kurti's self-determination movement continues to govern, with Kurti as acting prime minister.
Në këto takime janë marrë gjithsej 17 vendime nga një kabinet jo qeveritar I cili në përbërjen e tij ka pasur kryeministra dhe ministra që në kundërshtim me nenin 72 të kushtetutës kanë prezantuar dhe kanë qenë pjesë e vendimarrjes.
In April, Kosovo's legislature swore in 120 lawmakers in parliament, but it failed twice to elect a new speaker, a process that's now taken the country into a prolonged legislative crisis.
The European Union identified China as a state actor responsible for a cyber attack campaign against Czechia. EU High Representative Kaja Kallas said Brussels will not tolerate those actions and they are ready to impose costs on Beijing.
Today, EU and NATO hold a Chinese state-backed actor responsible for malicious cyber campaign against the Czech Republic. This attack is unacceptable breach of international norms. The EU will not tolerate hostile cyber actions and we stand in solidarity with the Czech Republic.
Yes.
The hacking campaign against Czechia started in 2022 and mostly targeted the foreign ministry. China is yet to respond to the allegations. The Swiss village of Blatten has been partially destroyed after a massive chunk of the Birch Glacier avalanched down into the valley. Footage shows a thick brown sludge covering almost the entire village located in southern Switzerland. Officials had evacuated the village's 300 residents as well as all livestock earlier this month as a safety measure due to fears of the glacier disintegrating. Residents say around 90% of the village has been covered or destroyed. Authorities say a 64-year-old man was reported missing and search and rescue operations are underway.
Nepal celebrated the 72nd anniversary of the conquest of Mount Everest on Thursday, the 29th of May, known as International Everest Day. A rally was held in Nepal's capital Kathmandu, attended by climbers, guides, and many others. On this day in 1953, New Zealander Edmund Hillary and Sherpa guide Tenzing Norgay reached the top of the world's highest mountain. Since then, Mount Everest has been climbed thousands of times, including multiple ascents by individuals, particularly Sherpas.